Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos, where industry leaders share their thoughts and experience on the future of space business, policy, and opportunity. If you like Constellations, please support us by giving a rating and review on iTunes. And don't forget to share this podcast online to help our community grow.
Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. My name is John Gilroy, and I'll be your moderator. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development recently stated that, as more than 80% of global trade volume is shipped by sea, countries' participation in the international supply chains depends on their maritime connectivity. That is, availability of reliable and efficient shipping services. Countries with low connectivity, such as those in Asia-Pacific, among others, remain on the margins of the major trading routes, unable to fully participate in the global economy. Today, Pacôme Revillon, CEO of Novaspace, joins us to explain the role of satellite in solving this challenge, including the impact of Starlink, ROI of maritime connectivity, and outlook on autonomous vessels. Well, Pacôme, we're going to jump right in here quickly. So what are the biggest pain points today in providing connectivity at sea?
Well, I shall say first that connectivity at sea is actually a myriad of vertical situation, companies, ship owners, crew members, passengers, eager to get connectivity either for professional purpose and for certain of them just for leisure reasons. So I must say, if you look at the global connectivity at sea issue, it's first a complex environment. You are at sea. You have to deal with a variety of regulations, obligations. You may be traveling around the world, passing through various waters. You may have some urgencies, maintenance, repair, and so forth, and you will need to provide crew welfare. So as more or less everybody on Earth, you need more and more data. You're hungry for it, but you're also in a closed environment where you make sure you can have the connectivity you need when you need it along your journey.
Yeah, it's more challenging than I think people realize. So what are some market pressures that are driving change in how maritime connectivity works?
Well, I must say, historically, if you were looking at a ship, connectivity was very much constrained. If you could think of a ship, even merchant, 20 crew members, and a number of applications, you hardly had a few megabit per second. And even for a larger ship, up to cruise, you had maximum dozens, maybe some more on offshore platform. So you were historically in an environment that was extremely constrained in terms of the real bandwidth that you could use. And on top of that, complexity in instilling, engineering the connectivity solutions on board. So market pressure essentially has been how you could deliver more bandwidth, better service that can still make economic sense for the ship owners.
Yeah, I think Americans, they expect to have service every place constantly. I don't realize that, I guess, 3/4 of the world's ocean. And so that's going to limit some connectivity issues there, isn't it, Pacôme?
Yeah, but I mean, it's very fair about American, but even if you think of a merchant shipping company and crew members, well, many of them being from Southeast Asia, for example, we spent weeks to months at sea on a ship and having obviously entertainment, but also very much remaining connected to their relatives, etc., has become a critical issue for even crew retention, which is a key issue for the industry. And on top of that, more and more, a ship is becoming an office as any other. And for company owners who do some distant monitoring, they want to be able to work with their crew as they would do with other colleagues in the headquarters.
Yeah, it's amazing. In my world, this phrase digital transformation really is, everyone talks about it, seems to be really important. I think it applies to your world too, you know. So how is the digital transformation of satellite connectivity at sea helping to change shipping participation of countries with historically low connectivity?
Well, I must say, I mean, connectivity at sea has multiple flavors, but because of merchant shipping is obviously transporting goods all around the world and in every place. So that digital transformation combined very much with cloud applications is what, again, you need to do to work, to monitor, to report as well. More and more for countries exporting, for example, fishes, you will need to report your production, your activity, and so forth. So it helps on the one side to bring the connectivity where you need it, but also to make sure that regulations are respected, and it's a support to economic trade between a number of countries.
Well, any conversation like this has got to involve Starlink, so I'm going to ask you a couple Starlink questions here. Let's talk a little bit more about the entrance of Starlink into the market. What is the impact that Starlink has had on maritime connectivity?
Well, certainly maritime, in the maritime domain, Starlink has already been transformative. I think there are 2 to 3 aspects to it. One aspect is obviously the volume of bandwidth that it has brought for, let's say, a quite comparable cost. So I'm not saying it's necessarily exactly the same. I would not say Starlink has reduced very much how much a company might spend to connect its vessels. What has changed is first, much larger bandwidth being offered to clients, not necessarily with guaranteed services, but across the board and based on what we've seen, certainly still good performance and data rates for many users and in many situations. It's also simplicity of deployment and use. And it's an important factor. The cost of the antenna being quite low compared to traditional pricing in the maritime sector. And the simplicity of installation have facilitated very much a scalable deployment of the solution. And for a variety of users, from leisure to merchant shipping to cruise as well.
Well, it sounds like a very powerful offering they have. And so the question is, do you think Starlink will become the dominant satellite network for maritime folks?
Well, becoming dominant is always a question of time horizon and what other stakeholders will bring to the market. So if we look middle term, there are also other constellation projects out there who certainly look at competing with what Starlink is offering today. So in the near term, clearly the offer has proved its attractiveness, and there is little doubt that Starlink would increase its market share significantly in the short term. So that being said, obviously what matters to the end user is the experience and the service that will be offered. So whether Starlink is now has introduced a new standard, little doubt about it. So how some other players in the ecosystem will try to adapt their offers, or if new constellation can just challenge them within a few years, that will be certainly an interesting development to follow. But whether Starlink is in right now really kind of the new, or developing the new standard for what connectivity has to be at sea is very much true.
Pacôme, earlier you used the phrase guaranteed service, and in data centers they talk about SLA, service level agreements. It's kind of an important part of a data center, and maybe important part of this offering too. So has Starlink's commercial strategy impacted the industry mindset on SLA parameters, and how so?
Well, I think certainly it has to a certain extent. Well, basically, SLA usually, as I mentioned earlier, is quite constrained in terms of bandwidth or megabit per second. So if you can offer 100 or several hundred Mbps per second, and in a degraded environment, you can still offer up to dozens of them, then maybe without SLA, your service will be sufficient. So that being said, it remains that many stakeholders and ship owners in the industry require a guarantee of a service working all of the time. So even for a service like Starlink, they don't have a license everywhere in the world. There are national waters where they can't operate. There can be either in some places still too many ships at sea and congestion. There could be some other technical issues on board. So for example, certain merchant owners, among the most sophisticated, may have up to 5 satellite terminals on board, just to make sure that whatever happens, they will remain connected. So I would say the sensitivity to SLA depends very much on the type of ship owners and operations at sea, but I don't expect them to disappear anytime soon. So it may be how to take the best of both worlds, I believe.
You talked about people being connected and family connections, and that's all well and good. Now, from a business perspective, Baker want to talk about money here. So let's talk about the money. So what is the ROI for end users investing in maritime connectivity?
Well, that's question of ROI in the digital world and application is always a bit difficult to exactly measure. I think there are typically 3 or 4 ROI down the road One is certainly about onboard maintenance, the ability to do more distant monitoring. We may talk about automated vessels later, but having maybe fewer crew members at some point in time, uh, which is one part of it. The second part is also how much you can do, really having the ship as an extension or as a new office for the company, where you can do more training, you can do telemedicine, you can optimize your operations, you can even obviously manage your route to avoid a particular weather situation or optimize your fuel consumption. So it's very much a matter of operations on the one side, and then a matter of reporting and just maybe as well spending less time at the port and more time at sea if you can have your operations on the go.
In the early days of computing, I used to do a lot of public speaking, and I always tell my audience, well, best practices here have backups, and if you don't back up, you'll crack up. And that really got some laughs out of the audience. Let's look at backup here. Can satellite industry players expect an increasing role as backup service in hybrid network solutions? Is that one opportunity?
Well, what we see right now in the industry, and interestingly enough, so we'll see where the future lies. But if you compare of the increase in the number of ships with Starlink on board, a vast majority of them have not necessarily canceled their previous subscriptions to VSAT. And I would still make a difference here between, for example, some of the leisure segments or lower say leisure as opposed to super yachts, or merchant shipping, which is really about merchant operations at sea, etc., or even a cruise ship. I think for let's call them sophisticated players, they have a genuine interest at maintaining, guaranteeing a certain level of connectivity. And if you compare the cost of the total cost of bandwidth and connectivity to the cost of their operations, having an issue with the ship or losing time, or, well, having a bad experience for passenger, for a cruise owner, you certainly find value in having backup solutions or one or two solutions to play with, depending on your application and depending on any event on board.
Yeah, it's really best practice in so many areas. Well, I think if you look at it from 30,000 feet, it looks like there's been an evolution here of maritime connectivity. And so can this evolution, exploit the availability of data? Can it improve that availability option?
Well, I mean, data availability certainly will just continue. And if you look at the number of data produced by a ship, transmitted from a ship, received to a ship, is just to grow. And if you ask me, I'm pretty certain that with the larger bandwidth available, there will not without a doubt be a kind of an exponential growth in the volume of data being transmitted by the vessels. Actually, what comes with the bandwidth, even on the Starlink network, is the data cap that you may have. That is much larger than in some previous offerings, could be up to a terabit per second or so. There can be various flavors of those, but actually the data cap may be the new limit in terms of subscription and how much a ship owner will be willing to pay for the service. But as anything, and honestly, very much like on the ground, as soon as people get more bandwidth, we see the volume of data increasing. And there is certainly a lot of room on board the ships to see that increase in the data flows. And we'll see more and more IoT on board. And if you have enough bandwidth to manage live transmissions, more cameras, distant management, that will be part of the game.
Pacôme, I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. And if you look at the number of regulators per square mile, we are just full. All kinds of regulators everywhere in the area here. So we got to talk a little about regulations here. So what is the role of regulations and standards in boosting the adoption of satellite communications in the maritime market?
Well, I think the maritime market has always been highly regulated. So a good part of it coming from the IMO, which can be quite conservative and long evolving thing, is certainly about security on board. So it's not always about massive bandwidth, but it's certainly about guarantees of connectivity in whatever weather conditions at sea for rescue purpose and others. That's one part. Then you have more regulations that is about passenger information, about trade, about cargo, etc., and increasingly rules that may apply between, for example, the European Union and some exporters of some goods, or in the US and so forth. So the ship owners may have to collect and share more and more data over time. As well, some routes will oblige some countries to get equipped with some solutions. Again, some of them can be very low bandwidth, just kind of IoT type reporting, and some of them can be driving more consumption. At the end of the day, regulation makes connectivity a must-have. If you look at bandwidth historically, and I'm not sure it has changed so dramatically, the crew and even passengers may represent 80% of the total traffic. And then for the rest of the users, it may take 10, 20, an increasing percentage based on cloud-based solutions being used by the ship owners. But a massive part will still be crew watching Netflix or communicating with their relatives, now doing video conferencing if they can, as opposed to have just a call and so forth. So the video portion, honestly, very much as on the ground, is a massive driver next to the regulatory obligations and to the professional uses. So the difference as well, talking about SLAs, is some of the use. I mean, if you have an issue while watching Netflix, that's not a big deal. A lot of bandwidth is fine. And if you have an interruption, you live with it. For regulated communications or some professional uses, then obviously it's where the SLA come very much into play. And even if lower bandwidth, you want that to be available and working all of the time.
We mentioned digital transformation earlier, but usually if you have a conversation about digital transformation, sustainability comes up in it eventually, sooner or later. So we talk about all kinds of technology changes here. So how can these technology changes help satellite contribute to the achievement of sustainability objectives?
Well, talking about smart assets, and if you look at even certain other industries that could be aero or maritime or others, the point is you want those assets to be more efficient. How can you save on fuel, on material and others? Well, you may be able to do predictive maintenance. You may be able to optimize your operation on board. You will be able to optimize your traffic route, just looking for the shortest or the one going around a stormy weather at sea, and that could either save fuel or look at the best destination you may need to go next. So I would say in terms of fleet management, fleet operation, it's where connectivity comes as well into play. And if you can optimize that and just save, 5-10% plus of the fuel consumption thanks to connectivity, and you take that at the level of the entire merchant shipping fleet, that's pretty massive. So I believe the benefit of connectivity is to better understand the assets, to do better maintenance, to avoid having leaks or some other aspects, and to be able to optimize your consumption.
If I have a conversation with my neighbors about autonomous vehicles, they, of course, think of cars, and, right now, as we speak, autonomous vehicles, including the transport of people and goods, are hitting the road. We know that. So what's the current status of autonomous maritime vessels, and how can satellite accelerate that development?
So I could not claim to be aware of every single trial, but what is for sure is that several ships have already, again, it's more trial stage now, but completed long journeys with a pure automated management. So that is now starting to be technically feasible. Then again, and as previously stated, there will have to be a path between what may be technically possible in certain conditions, what will be allowed from a regulatory standpoint, at which point in time, again, with that notion of backup purpose, and what part of the journey can you fully automate? Can you automate, let's say, the deep sea operations? Can you automate the entry into a port, etc.? So in what kind of waters can you make it happen? So I believe, honestly, that it would be a quite long process, maybe a 15 years, 20 years journey from technology feasibility down to complete authorization by regulatory bodies. So between now and then, you might still be able to optimize some operations or to reduce your crew tentatively if regulation allows, etc. So that will be that complete journey. But as well, you can do more distant monitoring, again, from telemedicine to repair and maintenance. So that will be a path. So the journey is there. The technology is is coming, and there is definitely progress and trials completed, then how quickly it can transfer into large-scale operations, well, there's still some years to go.
We've talked about evolution several times in this interview. I'm kind of end the interview here with a question about that. So looking into the future, how do you see maritime connectivity evolving?
Well, it's already quite a transformative period in the industry right now. So I would say the first step is to see that kind of new standard I was referring to still spreading across the industry. And I would say there are two aspects to it. One is equipped ships, vessels turning to that next generation of capabilities. And it is progressing quickly, but there's certainly still thousands of vessels to equip around the world. The second part is also some vessels that were not equipped before, some lighter, smaller vessels, either for leisure purpose or fishing or others, who shall be increasingly equipped with satellite solutions. So that will be a first evolution. Coming with that, and as we mentioned, the increasing data consumption will come with it and potentially require even additional bandwidth. But ultimately, I believe what will be important is not necessarily extra bandwidth in terms of megabit per second, but at some point, yes, that notion of backup, that notion of capabilities, those data caps in the industry and how you're reaching them or not. As in anything in the industry, there's no doubt we'll see some congestion here and there, because the more you give, the more you eat, and the more users will be willing to have. So that will be a step things in the coming years. So we have a phase now that could last for 3 or 4 years. Then we also have new competition coming from the industry itself. So I'm pretty sure that the second part of the decade, and it's just how the IT industry is transforming those days, I'm sure we'll need some more connectivity, but as well, many more cloud applications on board. And as everywhere, artificial intelligence, automated vehicle, automated management, and so forth, playing a bigger role in the industry.
Thank you, Pacôme, for your insights. And if our listeners want to get a more in-depth analysis of the sector, because it's tough to fit it all into a 20-minute conversation, please visit Novaspace's website to get their latest maritime satellite communications report. That's nova.space, Nova.space. I'd like to thank our guest, Pacôme Revillon, CEO of Novaspace.
Thanks for listening to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. If you like this interview, please subscribe, tell a friend, and give us a review.